Hi everyone, welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Jay Collier. So, hi, welcome. Could you please tell us a little bit about your background, your journey as an author, and then also how you became interested in combating misinformation related issues?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Jay Collier. I am originally an attorney by trade. I am now full-time diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. I also own a publishing company where we publish books by diverse authors, and we also focus on diversity in our publishing pipeline. So our illustrators, layout artists, editors, etc., are usually women or people of color. And so we're just trying to diversify the literature pipeline, one book at a time. And you said, how did I come to do this? I would say initially, I did not expect to be doing this full time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was an undergrad or in college, I was introduced to an organization called the National Coalition Building Institute. And that's where I learned that there was work to be done in terms of helping people understand interpersonal relationships across cultures, and that it was being done in corporations and organizations across the country to help people relate to each other better so they'd be better employees and, help business run more smoothly. And I applied those principles throughout my career. And I think ultimately maybe the job chose me and I wound up doing this full time, probably around 2019, 2020.
Yeah, I think it's super important work you're doing. Why do you think that truth is so important for society? And why do you think misinformation is such a big issue right now?
Yeah, sure. So honestly, I feel that if you lose truth, you've pretty much lost the underpinnings of everything. I think that truth is the cornerstone of trust, right? And trust is the foundational principle for every relationship. So whenever truth and trust is missing from a relationship, it completely crumbles. And we can see that at play in not just personal relationships like friendships or romantic relationships, but with between governments and citizens, between employers and employees.
Mhm.
In every relationship, when you no longer feel that someone is giving you the truth or that you can trust what you're being told or even shown, that
Mhm.
relationship starts to be compromised. And so I feel like being tethered very closely to the truth is imperative for any relationship, for any country, for any corporation. And so one of the things I always talk about is, to the greatest extent possible, we should be transparent. Certainly as leaders in our community, as leaders in organization, because that transparency establishes a level of trust. And to the greatest extent possible, people are sharing with you what is happening and why, and so that you can trust in that relationship even when things are tough. Like the economy right now is tough, but the employers that are being transparent and helping their employees navigate that, they're going to have a lot better retention than people who are sort of keeping things secret and hiding it, and everyone's sort of confused. They don't know what's coming next, and that creates a fear. So I think truth is, I can't think of anything more important than truth in society.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so how do I guess how can um either how can people like you or how do people like you try tackle misinformation or contribute to the fight against misinformation?
Yeah, so misinformation and misinformation campaigns have been around as long as time. You can trace it all the way back historically, way back to, I remember being in high school and learning about during wars how certain regimes would have these misinformation campaigns to make people feel this way or that. Very famously, during Hitler's time, he did a lot of misinformation campaigns to pit people against each other. And I kind of think that's the worst type of misinformation. And I think the biggest the biggest grouping or intentional misinformation campaign around what I do right now, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion work in the US. I don't know, I can't speak for what's happening globally right now, but certainly here, the biggest misinformation campaign that's happening now is a very common one that comes up probably every 4 to 6 years. It's the same thing. It's not new. And it's this idea that if you can make a villain out of some group of people, then you can distract them from other more pressing issues that are happening. I think it's a very political type of strategy. We all sort of famously saw that happen, or infamously saw that happen during the initial Trump era, when it was like people are coming from Mexico and they're very dangerous, and it's this villainizing and othering of any group. It doesn't always even matter which group, as long as it distracts from other things that should be done and are not being done. And that's the misinformation campaign that we fight against the most in diversity, equity, inclusion. This idea that you can find a group or a culture and blame them for any a negative thing that's happening on a grand scale or on a personal scale. And we really try to fight against that concept, because honestly, when we're all working together and pulling together and keeping priorities, the whole country does better. And whenever our attention is pulled away to this sort of straw man idea of a villain that's snuck into society, then we lose progress, and we spend all this time infighting. And I think it really weakens us as a country. It weakens industries. And so we're really hoping that what we do right now, which is constantly reiterating bridge building concepts, working together. What's the value of having diversity on your teams? The value of having people from all different cultures, backgrounds, genders, religious traditions. If you bring all these people together, you get more ideas, you get better ideas, you get more robust and rich information. It makes companies better, it makes them more profitable. And that's one of the big keys that we've been using in recent years to fight misinformation, is real statistics, real data. And we're able to show, forget about the feel good stuff and the humanitarian stuff, which is close to my heart, but we can just show from the data that the companies and the organizations that are embracing diversity, they're just doing better. They're outselling, they're generating greater profits, they're expanding market share faster, they're able to leverage globalization better. So honestly, you're just better when you build the bridges and work together, rather than trying to find a bad guy, right? Or trying to have that infighting. And so that's how we combat misinformation right now, is with the hard data. They say, what is that funny quote? I think it's like, men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. Is that the right quote? I think that came out of millennials or Gen Z. I don't know what, but I love that quote, because at the end of the day, if we can use statistics and data, we can show that this is direction we should be heading. And anyone who tells you anything else doesn't really have your best interests at heart. And we're able to show companies those numbers. We're able to show individuals those numbers. And so that's our approach to it.
Yeah. So, how do you think social media can be used to both like make the misinformation issue worse and help combat it?
So
Sorry,
social
just like
media in a lot of ways, yeah.
like internet in general.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, social media in a lot of ways has been a great equalizer, because people can speak directly to the audience that wants to hear from them, and no one could really stop that, right? So it used to be you couldn't get coverage in a newspaper or a magazine or on TV unless you knew the right people and you moved in the right circles. So it was hard to be heard through the noise. But with the dawn of the Twitters and the Snapchats and the TikTok and everything else, you can speak directly to people and they can hear your message, and no one can really gatekeep that. To the converse, on the other side, there's not a lot of vetting in that. And so you have people who have these huge platforms that they've built and these huge audiences, and maybe they haven't necessarily done the research. or they don't necessarily understand the negative impacts of them just saying something without vetting it, without making sure that it's true. And so you can also have huge misinformation fires that build really quickly because there's no one to vet it. So I think it's a blessing and a curse. I think social media and the internet is here to stay. I am a little concerned more recently as AI has sort of caught fire and started building really quickly, about some of the legal implications of that. We've got people who were able to perfectly mimic voices of other famous people. They're able to make it look like someone is in a place that they're not with the AI imaging from people's faces. So I think it's a little touch and go right now, and I think the law will catch up with it, and we'll probably see a lot more regulation about people using and misusing artificial intelligence. In my industry, in publishing industry, there's a lot of concern about people being able to steal your work and sort of take the words and rearrange them in another way and put out your same book, because AI is really good at that. It's taking written words that are available online
Mhm.
and just reorganizing it and calling it an original work. This is like uncharted territory, so only time will tell, but if it's anything like what we've seen in the past, the lawyers will very quickly start catching up with the technology, and we'll see Congress and the judicial system pass a number of laws and regulations and policies to keep people from being robbed of their intellectual property.
Yeah. Um, are there any like books that you've like helped publish that like address like misconceptions about like minority groups or something related to like promoting like um information or like correct information and like sharing like the author's experiences about like being a minority?
So yeah, so we've published a number of really good books, both children's books and adults books that touch on these issues. My book on diversity, equity, inclusion has not been published yet. It's still in the works, but there's an amazing book on the market right now through Birdhouse Publishing called The Blacklist. It's by an author named Marquise Bynum. He is a fairly high-ranking personnel in the U.S. military, and his job is that he is a fantastic historian, and he's great with information. And so he was able to chronicle from literally like I think 1526 to 2020, if I'm not mistaken, the happenings in this country that sort of tie together how we arrived at the year of George Floyd, as we sometimes call it, like how we arrived at that point from that to this. He does a really good job of in not a light way, but a very interesting way. He sort of weaves in hip hop ideology, and talks about how everything is connected, how nothing we see even right now is in a vacuum, but how we've sort of progressed to this place, and what things set us back, what things brought us forward in terms of civil rights and human rights. So if you get a chance to grab that book, it's called The Blacklist by Marquise Bynum, Bynum. It's it's an amazing it's an amazing book. And I think should be required reading for someone who wants to understand race relations in the US, but not really ready for something super heavy, like a textbook, or like there's some really great books out by Isabella Wilkerson and some others. Stamped from the Beginning is another great book, but those are really dense, and they're a little tougher to get through, some of them. So I think The Blacklist, especially for book clubs who just want to sort of get up on what's going on right now, I think in terms of race relations in the US, I think The Blacklist is a great place to start. And that came out under Birdhouse Publishing back in 2022, I think. It came out Juneteenth, 2022. Yeah. So I would encourage people to pick that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the suggestion. Um, so, how can, I guess, individuals, particularly like young people, work to like promote diverse voices, in their communities and fight against misinformations or like, stereotypes, related to minority groups?
Yeah. So let me say this. I am constantly in awe of this current generation Z. They call them Gen Z, because I feel like this generation has been, more than any generation before it, sort of unafraid to speak truth to power. And so I've seen a lot more young people in their very early 20s or their late teens sort of almost educating their parents about, like, look, let's just drop all the pretense. This is what's going on. We're not here for it. We want to see change. We're not willing to wait for it. We don't want to hear about later. And they've really changed the whole landscape of how we converse with each other, dialogue. They've certainly changed the working landscape. I work in the private sector, and we have conversations all the time about how people work. Can they be hybrid? Can they work from home? What do they want from their employer? How do they relate to the employer? Do they feel fulfilled? These are conversations 15, 20 years ago we would not be having. It was like, you have a job, we pay you. You should be happy to have this job. End of story. And I think Gen Z has given a voice to the things that are important to them, and they've really ushered in almost an industrial revolution. I really believe that Gen Z has sort of cornered the market on speaking truth to power, standing firm in their beliefs. And so I would strongly encourage younger people to continue to do that. People will bluster and blow and try to back you down, but when you know what's right, you know what's right. And I have found over my life that age does not always necessarily equate to wisdom. And so when you run into someone who says, oh, you're too young to have an opinion on this, or you haven't paid your dues yet, you can't weigh in on this, I would avoid that type of sentiment, because it's just not true. In fact, oftentimes we have the most progress and the most innovation from fresh new ideas and eyes and thoughts coming into the workplace, coming into organizations, coming into causes. And so continue to speak up about what you know to be true, what you know to be right. And because you're honestly the generation that we are listening to the most, because the baby boomers are aging out of industry, of market, and even in some cases out of politics, even though people tend to stay in politics to a higher age, but they're aging out. Behind them, the millennials, which in large part sort of is responsible for raising Gen Z. We want to hear what you have to say. We're excited about it. We're excited about the type of people that we created and sort of flooded into the world, because we understand that we are evolving as a humanity with each generation. And so I've met lots of younger people who have a really good grasp on where they stand in the world. And they may only be 19, 20, 22, but they recognize, I think people should be treated with dignity and kindness and compassion. I do not believe that I have nothing to offer to this conversation just because I'm young. I do not believe that I need to waste 20 years, quote unquote, paying my dues before I'm allowed to have a seat at the table or before my opinion counts. And so I would encourage Gen Z to continue to speak truth to power, to stand in your truth, to be willing to question things that have been a certain way all the time. Question it. Just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean it has to continue to be done that way. And certainly there's something that you all have to offer that we haven't thought of yet. And so in combating misinformation, the one takeaway that I would say is almost like a warning, maybe, is because many of Gen Z is on social media. I would caution them to vet everything you hear. Even if you followed someone, their account for years, don't just start taking what they say as gospel. Still use your ability to research, to fact check, check it against your own sense of integrity and your own moral compass as well, to make sure it still feels good, like it's something that you want to follow. You never have to take anything as gospel truth. So do continue to vet your sources, even if you believe in them. especially like I said, in this age of AI, when you may think you're hearing something from a certain person and it's not them and it's not their voice, and this is uncharted territory. But certainly continue to use your own intuition to fact check and make sure things still land where they should, but certainly don't back down, and continue to move forward. And we're so proud. I have a 21-year-old. I am so proud of the man that I have raised, and he argues with me all the time. And he has opinions that I certainly didn't give him. He's developed them on his own, and it's really impressive to see him coming to his own conclusions and speaking up for himself and his peers. And so please don't change. Don't ever change. Don't get burnt out and say, well, nobody's listening to us. Things aren't happening fast enough. Maybe we can't make a difference. You certainly can.
Thank you for that. That was really awesome advice and very inspiring. Um, so I think those are all my questions that I have prepared. So is there anything else you would like to add that you haven't covered yet? If
No, I thank you for doing this. This is a really innovative idea. I love that you're asking people about misinformation in their industry. I watched some of your previous videos. I watched the epidemiologist you had on. So you're doing great work. I'd love to stay on and talk to you a little bit after the recording, but this is really cool.